This is Fresh Air. I'm Terry Gross. My guest, Misty Copeland, became the first African-American woman to become a principal dancer with the American Ballet Theatre, America's national ballet company. That was in 2015, the same year the company celebrated its 75th year. She was the only black woman in the company for the first 10 years of her career. Among the principal roles she danced was the title role of the Firebird, the Stravinsky Ballet, and the dual role of the Swan Queen and the Black Swan in Swan Lake. Her new memoir is about the pride and pressures of being a first in a world she describes as refusing to see black people as equals, capable of succeeding in traditionally, quote, European art forms. Her skin color, her body, her hair didn't conform to what ballerinas were supposed to look like. She was told many times to give up ballet and pursue modern dance instead. But she became a ballet star, and a star outside of ballet. She danced in performance with Prince on his Welcome to America tour, and danced on Broadway in the revival of On the Town. For her performances and for her work advocating for greater representation in ballet and other art forms, in 2015, Time magazine named her one of the 100 most influential people in the world. Her new memoir, The Wind at My Back, is also about her mentor, Raven Wilkinson, who in 1955 became the first black ballerina to receive a contract with a major ballet company, the Ballet Russe de Monte Carlo. Back then, segregation was legally mandated in much of the South. Wilkinson was not allowed to stay with the rest of the company in hotels or eat with them in restaurants, and she was frequently in mortal danger. Ku Klux Klan members once stormed the stage of one of the company's rehearsals looking for her. To protect herself and the company from credible threats, she had to stop touring with them in the South and then quit the company and continue her career outside of America with the Dutch National Ballet. Misty Copeland says her journey would have been impossible without Wilkinson's career, her example, her love, and friendship. Misty Copeland, welcome to Fresh Air and congratulations on the new memoir.
Thank you so much.
What was it about your body that was considered wrong for ballet?
Well, what's interesting is when I started ballet at 13 years old, I was told I had everything that it took to be a ballet dancer, physically, artistically. So, that's why there's kind of this interesting dichotomy when I think about black women specifically in ballet and the language that's being used in telling us that we're wrong for ballet. Again, I had the ideal body. When I joined American Ballet Theatre, of course I went through puberty and like a lot of dancers, who become professionals between the ages of 16 and 18. And my body did change. But once I became a professional, that's when people started to really see me as a black woman in a company where there weren't any. And that's when the language started to change around me, fitting in. I was told, I'm still to this day, will read things, that I don't belong because my breasts are too large, my muscles are too big, I'm too short. But these are all excuses because there are so many dancers who are not of color who have similar body types to me that are shorter, that have larger breasts and bigger muscles. So, throughout the course of my professional career, it's really been about me understanding the language that's being used and having conversations about that, because that's been what's turned so many black women away from ballet, is because they're told those things.
You danced, among the leading roles that you had was the role of the Swan Queen, the White Swan in Swan Lake, and the role of the Black Swan. You danced a dual role. Is Swan Lake maybe like the whitest of all of all classical ballets? Because, like the swan, she's a white swan.
Right. Yeah. I'd say it's up there. There's a whole category of classical works called the ballets blancs, which translates to the white ballets.
I didn't know that.
And yes, and Swan Lake is one of them. But Les Sylphides, Giselle, La Bayadère, Swan Lake, all of these ballets that have a second act where the entire corps de ballet is dressed in all white, white tutus or whatever it is they may be wearing. And they typically are portraying a character that's otherworldly. And so they tend to have the dancers all powder their skin with white powder to make them look, otherworldly, to make them look like they're not alive. But it doesn't really translate on brown skin. It's one thing just to cover the skin and make it not shine so it doesn't look as human. It's another thing to have someone paint their skin white, and that's been the pattern of experience of Black women in these ballets, if they're even allowed to perform in those acts, in those ballets. But yes, what you just said, the fact that it's a white swan that we're portraying, and so many Black and brown women have been told that, well, she's a white swan. Like, why would we put a Black or brown body in that? So yes, it is. It was quite a big deal for me to portray that role at American Ballet Theatre, or for any Black woman to portray that role. But my kind of argument, I guess, has always been that, we're playing characters. We're actors and actresses on stage. These dancers who are portraying the Black Swan aren't Black. And swans come in different colors. And again, it's taking on a role, and that's the true beauty of art. It's telling a story. It's becoming something you're not, and convincing people that they are in this world with you.
Such a good point you just made, that to dance the role of the Black Swan, you don't have to be Black.
Right.
So, yeah. I think the first time you danced in the American Ballet Theater's Corps de Ballet was in Swan Lake, and you had to do what you just said. You not only had to use white powder, you had to use white foundation,
Yes.
which is thicker than powder,
Right.
more closely approximating a kind of paint.
Yeah.
What was your reaction? Can you compare your reaction to having to do that then, very early in your career, and how you think about that now?
Yeah. It's difficult for a young person who, you think about the history and the level of American Ballet Theatre and what that company means for ballet. And to be this young, I think I was 19 at the time when I performed at the Metropolitan Opera House at Lincoln Center for the first time. A couple of years, maybe 3-4 years before that, I was living in a motel with my 5 siblings and my single mom. And now I'm, on the stage of the Metropolitan Opera House getting this opportunity. And it's kind of this pressure. It's like, well, this is what it takes to be in this position. You're getting this opportunity, so you have to fit in. And, I think that deep down inside, it was something that felt very uncomfortable for me. I think about my experience when I first started dancing in the small studio in San Pedro, California, and my teacher, Cynthia Bradley, who was a white woman, but was very kind of grounded and connected to all of these things we're talking about with race in ballet. And I remember her letting me wear skin-colored tights in a lot of the classical roles I was performing as a young person.
When you say skin color, you mean white skin color, right?
No, I mean my skin color. She was, which is not really allowed. I mean, things are changing today.
That's why I thought you meant white skin color. I thought you
Right.
were trying to cover up.
No, that's the norm. That's the norm, is that
uh-huh.
everyone wears pink tights, and that's representative of white skin. So it was something I was aware of when I was 19 and came into ABT, that I, would have to wear pink tights in all the classical works, and then having to go on stage and make my skin, attempt to make my skin look like the other dancers. It chips away at you. As the years went on, it just, the more that I'd look around, and not see people who looked like me, not see other women who looked like me, and I'm painting my skin over and over, it was something I started to talk about. Whether it was with my colleagues, eventually with the artistic staff, and with my artistic director, Kevin McKenzie. And eventually, I don't know, maybe 7-8 years later, I would have that conversation with the wardrobe department, with hair and makeup, and kind of debate, what the sole purpose of this tradition is, And as I was saying earlier, if it's just to make us look otherworldly, then why can't I have brown powder to powder my skin to take that shine away? Why am I changing the color? And I did it as a principal dancer when approaching the last time I performed the role of Swan Lake. I did that, and in other roles where I was told to paint my skin white. So I did push back, but we have a long way to go still.
Sure, sure. When you became the first Black principal ballerina with the American Ballet Theatre, what did it mean to you to be the first?
Oh, it had been such a long journey to getting to that point. So my ideas of what I was striving for had evolved a lot, especially after meeting Raven and our relationship developing into what it was. She changed like my outlook on how I looked at my path and my purpose. When I first joined the company, and I think most dancers have this goal. They get into the corps de ballet or apprentice with the company and they say, like, my goal is to be a principal dancer, and that becomes like everything. That becomes your mission day in and day out. But over time, I realized that it wasn't so much about that title for me, that it was really about getting the opportunities to be on stage in roles that would make an impact on my community. Black and brown people coming to the theater and seeing me on the stage. That was the goal. It was to bring a more diverse audience in, to give opportunity to the next generation. But after 15 years in the company, which is a long time to be in the company and still be working towards becoming a principal dancer, that's not common. Typically, if you're not promoted to that position within maybe the first 10 years of your career, it most likely is not going to happen. So, after 15 years, I was really kind of comfortable in the position I was in. I was getting to perform Swan Lake and Juliet and Romeo and Juliet and the lead in The Nutcracker and Giselle and the lead in Coppelia. And it was like, this is what I'm doing this for, to be an artist on the stage, to be up there and have an audience come and see me and have a Black and brown audience come and see me. So once the promotion actually happened, I think I was a little numb. It had been such a long journey. I really think it took about a year before it really sunk in. And I could recognize how necessary it was for me to have that title, how necessary it was for the Black community to have a principal dancer that could eventually open doors for more dancers of color to come.
What were some of the pressures that came with being the first Black principal ballerina with the ABT?
It was really an interesting time for me. So when I was making these debuts in big, leading roles, for most dancers, you'll make your debut, on a Wednesday matinee, and some people will come, and there probably won't be a critic there at all to critique your show or talk about it. And I had the exact opposite experience. Every time I was making a debut in a role, the New York Times was there. There were blogs and people writing, will Misty succeed? And if she doesn't, what does that mean for her career? What does that mean for the African American dance community? So there was a lot of added pressure outside of just being an elite athlete at American Ballet Theatre and all that it takes to perform these roles, which is extremely pressure-filled and difficult.
Well, let me give an example of something that you faced when you were performing in Singapore in the role of, I think it was Swan Lake, and there's like 32 fouettes.
Fouettes, yes.
Fouettes, thank you. That you're supposed to do in that, and you did fewer than that. Mm-hmm. You didn't do all 32.
Right.
I should also say, I think by that time you had a lot of leg pain from an injury. Mm-hmm. So somebody filmed that part on their phone, put it on YouTube, and really tried to take you down as a result.
Right.
And you actually responded. So before we get to your response and your reaction to all of this, explain to those of us who don't really follow ballet what a fouettée is compared to, say, a pirouette.
Okay. So the 32 fouettes has become this technical feat that is expected in certain ballets. Le Corsaire, La Bayadère, Don Quixote, Swan Lake, in some cases, depending on the choreographer, the Nutcracker. So it is a pirouette where you are rotating on one leg. But in between the rotation, you have a whipping motion of the leg. So it's in passe, which we call it, where the toes are touching the supporting leg, the standing leg that you're turning on. And your whipping motion allows you to continue rotating. So you're supposed to rotate 32 times consecutively, without putting that leg down. So you're consistently on one leg for 32 rotations. You're not expected to move from this, I guess, the size of a dime. You're literally spinning on a dime 32 times. And what makes it so difficult
on your toes.
On your toe, wearing pointe shoes on your toe. But what makes it even more difficult is that this comes typically, it's in the coda, we call it, which comes at the end of, a 3 or 4 act ballet. So you've already been dancing for hours, and it's kind of the big finale. But it's become the norm to do the 32 fouettes, and performing them on that injured leg, where I ended up having 6 stress fractures in that leg and a plate screwed into my tibia. It was even more difficult to do, and I was in a lot of pain. So all of that was happening when I was performing the 32 fouettes.
So when you didn't do all 32, and someone put this up on YouTube and then condemned you for it and questioned, your... I think they said that the American Ballet Theatre should be ashamed to have you. And you decided to write a long response and post it. What were some of the things you wanted to say in response to the criticism?
I don't know how savvy I am with social media, but I'm very honest. But I thought this was like a learning lesson. Number one, to share a little bit of history about the ballet and about that step in particular and about the evolution of it, about the fact that we're human beings and that we have feelings as well, and that it's not fair, to first of all to step into the sacred space, the theater, and film someone where you're not supposed to be filming, and I just thought the whole thing was done in poor taste. And so, what I wanted to say was that that's, one person's feelings about my performance. And this is a subjective art form, and everyone's, entitled to their opinions. But that we have a responsibility when we go on stage, and it takes a lot to have the courage and the talent to get up there and do what we do, and that it's not always about these technical feats. That we're not a sport, we're not performing or competing in the Olympics. This is an art form, and everyone has their own interpretations, and not everyone is expected to be exactly the same. And yeah, I wanted it to be a positive message that I do belong at American Ballet Theatre, and that not everyone has perfect performances, and even professionals make mistakes and have injuries, and I wanted to be transparent in that way.
Well, let me reintroduce you here. If you're just joining us, my guest is Misty Copeland, and her new memoir is called The Wind at My Back. We'll be right back after a short break. I'm Terry Gross, and this is Fresh Air. Let's get back to my interview with Misty Copeland, who became the first African-American woman to become a principal ballerina with the American Ballet Theatre, America's national ballet company. That was in 2015, the same year the company celebrated its 75th year. Her new memoir is about the pride and pressures of being a first in a world she describes as refusing to see black people as equals, capable of succeeding in traditionally, quote, European art forms. Her memoir is also about her mentor, Raven Wilkinson, who in 1955 became the first black ballerina to receive a contract with a major ballet company, the Ballet Russe de Monte Carlo. I want to talk about what it's been like for you to dance on an injured leg. You found out eventually that you had 6 stress fractures in your tibia. 3 of them were what's called black line fractures, meaning they were
black line.
dreaded black line. Yes, right. Meaning that they were almost full breaks through the bone. So that had to be like super painful. Then you ended up getting a plate, a steel plate.
Yeah, screwed into my tibia.
Put in. How long were you dancing with those fractures? Not knowing exactly how serious they were.
I would say it was over the course of a year, probably, that it started. In the beginning, I thought I had shin splints, and they just kept getting worse and worse and worse. It was in 2012, and it was the first time that I was given the opportunity to perform the lead in a classical work after, I guess it was maybe 12 years in the company, which is a long time to wait for that first role, and it was the Firebird. So I knew how critical this moment was for my career. I knew that if I had gone to the artistic staff or the physical therapists and said, I'm in a lot of pain, they would have removed me from the rehearsals and I would not have been able to perform. And I knew that had that happened, I wouldn't be given the opportunity again. I was 29 years old at the time, which is very late to be doing your first principal role. I knew it wouldn't come again once I had healed. So I didn't tell anyone, and I pushed through in order to get on stage and prove that I was capable of being a principal dancer in a classical work, not in a contemporary or modern work, but in a classical ballet. And the pain just became so severe by the time I got to the performance. I think it was it was towards the end of the year, at the end of our season at American Ballet Theatre, when I finally just couldn't do it anymore in the last performance I had before my surgery at Lincoln Center.
How do you dance on stage and either spin on your bad leg or land on it without grimacing, without groaning? I mean, you're supposed to look like, oh, this is effortless, and you're in like major pain.
Yeah. I think any ballet dancer, any ballerina would tell you that it's a part of the training. We are athletes, but we are also performers, and we're also artists. So we're not just training in technique, in the ballet technique, but our goal is to tell a story, to make it look effortless, never to show any weakness or pain. When we go on stage, it's a switch that turns on where you almost don't even feel the pain. There's so much adrenaline rushing through you, and you enter into this fantastical world of whatever ballet you're performing, whatever character you're portraying, and it's like you're no longer human. And that was the case even, in that last performance, when I could barely walk when I was off stage, but I'd get on stage and somehow could muster up all the energy and courage to keep jumping and performing.
When you finally went to the American Ballet Theatre's orthopedic surgeon after dancing the Firebird, you were told you may never dance again. That must have been a pretty terrifying thing to be told.
It was devastating. It was devastating to go from this extraordinary high of, dancing at Lincoln Center, at the Metropolitan Opera House, seeing, this massive poster on the facade of the Met, just in front of the fountain, of me as the Firebird, representing American Ballet Theatre in the spring season, performing to a sold-out show. More than half of the audience was black and brown, young people. And then 2 days later, I'm in the office, of this orthopedic surgeon. He's telling me, I don't think you're ever going to dance again. It was just like my whole world came crashing down. And I felt, I think mostly like I was letting down the Black community. I felt like I had just cracked open this door for young Black and brown people to come in. And then if I wasn't going to step on that stage again, it was just going to be shut again. And I didn't know when I was going to ever see a Black woman get an opportunity like that again. So I did not accept those words. It was like my mind just went into like hyperdrive, and I was determined to find a doctor who could help me. So I must have seen 7 or 8 surgeons before I found the one that said, I see this injury in football players and basketball players that I operate on all the time, and I can help you. And I said, let's go.
So this was the surgeon who put in the steel plate?
Yes.
Does the steel plate hurt? Do you feel that it's there?
Yes. So while this procedure allowed for me to ensure that I wasn't going to injure myself again, I knew that I could jump on it and do whatever I needed to do, and it was protected. But I was on stage at 8 months after the procedure, which was very quick. So I have had pain from the moment I had the surgery, and it's been almost 10 years, I guess, since I had it, and I'm still in a lot of pain. Having my weight on one leg, on the leg of my surgery, or pushing off of that leg or landing on it, it causes tremendous pain. I recently had another procedure on it, maybe 4 months ago, I think it was, to have one of the screws removed because we thought that would alleviate some of the pressure that was causing pain. I'm not quite sure if it's worked. I'm told to give myself a little more time.
So what is the status of your dance career now?
I am still a principal ballerina with ABT, though I have, been off, starting with the pandemic. And then I had my son, Jackson, 7 months ago. So I am still making my way back to the stage, and am hoping to be back on the stage with ABT in the fall, winter of 2023.
Well, let me reintroduce you here. If you're just joining us, my guest is Misty Copeland, and her new memoir is called The Wind at My Back. We'll be right back after we take a short break. This is Fresh Air. If you're just joining us, my guest is Misty Copeland, who became the first African-American woman to become a principal ballerina with the American Ballet Theatre, America's national ballet company. That was in 2015. Her new memoir is about the pressures and the pride of being a first. It's also about her mentor, Raven Wilkinson, who in 1955 became the first Black ballerina to receive a contract with a major ballet company, the Ballet Russe de Monte Carlo. Let's talk about your mentor, Raven Wilkinson, who you write about in your new memoir. The first Black dancer to get a contract with a major American ballet company was the Ballet Russe de Monte Carlo in 1955. She had to not only deal with the pressures of being a first, she had to deal with the dangers of performing with an otherwise white dance company for predominantly white audiences in the South during legal segregation. And she was not only marginalized and forced to eat in the, quote, colored restaurants and stay in the, quote, colored hotels, she was in mortal danger. Tell us about one of the times that the Klan, the Ku Klux Klan, threatened her, and in a really serious way.
For the most part, this was taking place when they were in Montgomery, Alabama, when the company was on tour, the Ballet Russe. I'd say one of the scariest. Well, there were so many. It's hard to pinpoint one. I mean, I know there were times when she would be in the hotel room and she could see crosses burning in the distance from her window. That must have been terrifying for her. But one story in particular, when the tour bus was making its way through the town, and I believe they were on their way to the theater, and traffic was stopped, and some men kind of ran onto the tour bus. They're looking for the Black dancer that they knew was there in the company. And I can't imagine, this feeling of just being trapped on this bus and with no way out. And the dancers in the company were very protective over Raven and often would stand up and literally block her, her body from being seen or touched. And eventually, I think the bus driver, forced them off the bus. But the fact that she was experiencing these things and then going straight to the theater and performing and kind of having to get into this different mental head space and perform for an audience that was probably prejudiced against her being up there. Maybe they didn't know she was up there. I don't know what it was, but I just can't imagine psychologically and emotionally what she was going through. And eventually, it even got to her because she eventually left the company, realizing that it was too much to take on top of already, being a performer.
But then she couldn't dance in America. Like, she auditioned for several major dance companies, and they all turned her down, and she ended up having, I think, a 10-year career with was it the Dutch National Ballet?
Yes. Yeah, in Amsterdam.
And then after 10 years with the Dutch National Ballet, she came back to the States and danced with the New York City Opera. So, what's some of the advice she gave you about, being a first or facing racism after the, extreme and dangerous racism and attacks that she faced?
Her messaging to me or the lessons I learned were never, this kind of typical connection of, I experienced racism and this is what I learned, so this is what you should do. Raven would tell, these stories and then kind of lead by example. Or her example was the ways that, she explained how she responded to certain situations. So she never, it was never this kind of teacher-student relationship. Though it was, it wasn't outwardly that way. Raven was my friend and she was like an older sister and she would support me. But there were never outward lessons that, she was wagging her finger at me and telling me I should do.
You write that she helped you bridge the gap between Misty the person and Misty the ballerina. What was the gap that you were experiencing?
She, allowed me to kind of tie my experiences together. All that she had experienced and gone through and learned throughout the course of her life, she channeled into her performances. They made her a better person. And I think that was something that I hadn't quite done before I met her, was connecting the person I was trying to become off stage to the person I was on stage, being comfortable in my skin and having a voice. I was always so comfortable with the voice that I had on stage. I was so shy and introverted in my everyday life, but when I would get on stage, I felt like I could be whoever I wanted to be. I could be so clear in what it was I wanted to say. I had confidence and grace, but I was terrified to have all of those things, or maybe felt I didn't deserve to have all of those things in my everyday life. And she kind of showed me that I could be all of those things off stage as well. And what an example I would be if I was all of those things when I was off stage as well.
Well, let me reintroduce you here. If you're just joining us, my guest is ballerina Misty Copeland. Her new memoir is called The Wind at My Back. We'll talk more after a short break. This is Fresh Air.
The following message comes from NPR sponsor Sattva. Founder and CEO Ron Rudson says that a critical part of the Sattva experience is having a mattress that's made to order.
When you order a mattress from us, your mattress has a birth date after you order it. And people love that. Think about it. Nothing sits in muggy warehouses. Nothing sits in muggy basements of stores. When you order it, you're getting your product made fresh for you, delivered to your room of choice. We take out all of your debris and take out your old mattress as well. We can bring in our mattress. We can bring in a foundation. We also have adjustable bases. So we're the folks that kind of sell mattresses like you see in stores, except we operate in an e-commerce modern way.
To learn more, go to SAATVA.com/NPR.
As secure as you felt on stage, as at home as you felt on stage, as a ballerina. You grew up with a lot of insecurity, and sometimes without even a home. You describe your mother as having had a series of relationships with, the wrong men. There were times when you didn't really have a home, when your mother would leave a relationship and you'd end up living in a cheap motel with your 6 siblings and your mother sharing a room.
5 siblings.
5 siblings, that's right. There's 6 total. Thank you. Yeah.
So from the time my family and I moved to Los Angeles, California from Kansas City, Missouri when I was 2 years old, for the most part, there wasn't a consistent place that we were staying in, I would say, except for the time that my mother married her 4th husband, that we actually had a home that we were living in. That was like the most stable our home environment was. I was between, I think, 7 and 9 years old. But it was after that divorce, so I 9, 10, something like that, that we were constantly moving from people that I didn't know that were friends of my mom's. We were staying at on their couches. It was literally from like week to week, month to month that we were moving between people's homes or between motels. And so that was probably for like 3 years or something. It was really difficult to be in school, and I felt that I couldn't get close to anyone because I was so embarrassed about my home situation. Didn't want anyone to know what was going on, whether it was the relationships my mom was in, the abuse that was happening in the household. I just kept everyone at a distance because I didn't want them to know. And it was really stressful. It was really stressful to kind of keep up this facade of happiness. And it wasn't until ballet came into my life that I started to feel that I could like be a person, a person in the world, like I could express myself. It was like I'd gone 13 years of my life without truly expressing what was inside of me or feeling comfortable in my skin. And it was ballet, and it was being in the studio, in the ballet studio, which felt so sacred. It felt so protective, and the same with the stage. And I know it's like the opposite of what people would think of performing. You're up there and you're so exposed and naked. And I felt the opposite. I felt like I finally found this place of comfort for the first time in my life.
You started dancing ballet with the Boys and Girls Club of America. And your teacher there, Cindy Bradley, really believed in you and your ability to become like a great dancer. And because at the time you were living at a motel that was like 13 miles away from school and from the Girls and Boys Club of America, she decided that you should stay at her place with her husband and young son during weekdays so you could get to both school and to your ballet classes easily, because your mother told you it's too much, you're going to have to quit ballet, which you didn't want to do. How did that change your life to be able to stay at your dance teacher's home, have her attention, have her be really devoted to you as her student, and also become like a surrogate parent?
It was so different from anything I'd ever experienced in my life. I was severely underdeveloped in every way, physically, mentally, emotionally. We had enough money to survive, barely, when I was living with my mother. And, what we were eating was not priority. It was just, what can we afford? Something as basic as that. When I lived at Cindy's house, I started to develop physically because I was getting nutritious food. I was having conversations, with Cindy and with her husband, conversations that I'd never experienced my entire life. Being one of 6 children, it's hard for, my mom, who's working several jobs and just trying to survive, keep us off the street, to have these intimate conversations with each one of us. I also just don't think it was really in her nature because of the way she was raised as well. This lack of communication. And I was forced to do that at Cindy's house. And I grew and developed immensely in the 3 years that I lived with them. It also was the first time I was in like a stable environment that wasn't chaotic, that I could like hear myself think. It was peaceful, and I could really just focus on the training, which is why I moved in with them, was to be able to, catch up on all the training that I missed out on by starting at 13 years old, which is late for, in ballet standards, because I would eventually go on to join American Ballet Theatre with only 4 years of training under my belt.
I can't let you go without asking you about dancing with Prince. You danced with him in his Welcome to America tour. And when I say dance with him, I mean he was performing, you were dancing at the same time, kind of interpreting the music, and you danced on his piano. What did he tell you he wanted you to do and why he wanted you to do it when he first asked you to perform with him?
He reached out to me. I must have been like maybe 26 years old, and he invited me to be in a music video of his. He said that when he had remade the song Crimson and Clover, and he just could envision me dancing to it. So that was the first thing that I did. He flew me out to LA, and I improvised on the set. I went straight to the set and improvised this choreography that he sat there watching and didn't really have much to say, but we developed a beautiful friendship over the years, and he eventually would invite me to tour with him, and then the ultimate experience though was performing on his Welcome to America tour, and especially the performances at Madison Square Garden. To see the way that he worked, his devotion to his craft and his eye for, performance. And it was just an incredible experience. But beyond, performing with him, it was the conversations we had. We talked about Raven a lot. We, talked about what it is to be the only, and, he kind of changed my mindset and way of thinking where, it was always kind of, I'm alone, I'm isolated, there's no one in this company who looks like me. And he would say, well, that's incredible. Your people are looking at you. You know how hard people have to work to be unique and different and stand out. And you have this power that a lot of people don't have, and that you're surrounded by, simply by the way you look or your body. And I never thought of it in that way. And he just really changed the way that I looked at the power that I held, rather than seeing it as a negative thing by being Black in this European white art form.
Misty Copeland, it's just been a pleasure to talk with you. Thank you so much, and I wish you all good things when you return to the stage.
Thank you so much for having me.
Misty Copeland's new memoir is called The Wind at My Back. Fresh Air's executive producer is Danny Miller. Our technical director and engineer is Audrey Bentham. Our interviews and reviews are produced and edited by Amy Salet, Phyllis Myers, Roberta Shorrock, Sam Brigger, Lauren Krenzel, Heidi Saman, Anne-Marie Baldonado, Thea Challoner, Seth Kelly, and Susan Yakundi. Our digital media producer is Molly C.V. Nesper. Teresa Madden directed today's show. I'm Terry Gross.